She was 7 years old. She had brown hair that her mother cut straight across every 6 weeks at the kitchen table, and she was missing one front tooth, and she could draw a horse from memory that looked enough like a horse that you knew immediately what it was. On the morning of June 14th, 1980, she walked 2 streets over from her family's house in Macon, Georgia, to a yard sale that a neighbor was holding, carrying 65 cents that her father had given her for the occasion. She never came home. That is not a story about a little girl who got lost on a summer morning. That is a story about a child who was taken, and about a woman who spent 44 years living as someone else, not knowing what had been stolen from her, not knowing the name she had been born with, not knowing that 2 streets over from where her life had been interrupted, a family had kept a light burning for her every single year. It would take 44 years, a swab of saliva, a database of strangers connected by blood, and a question a woman in Tennessee had been unable to stop asking. A question she couldn't name, only feel, to finally bring Emma Cole home. But to understand what that homecoming meant, you have to understand what was lost on June 14th, 1980. You have to go back to Macon, and to the yard sale, and to the family that the morning left behind. Macon sits at the geographic center of Georgia, a city of red clay and magnolias, and the kind of summer heat that arrives in May and does not leave until October. In 1980, it was a city of about 120,000, and the neighborhood where the Cole family lived, a street called Dogwood Lane off of Vineville Avenue, was the kind of neighborhood where children ran between yards all day in the summer, and parents kept their front doors open to catch the cross breeze, and everybody knew whose kid belonged to whose bicycle left on the sidewalk. Gerald and Ruth Cole had 3 children. Patricia was 3 years old in June 1980. Thomas was 9. Emma was the middle child, 7, and had the particular quality of middle children who have worked out exactly how much space they can occupy without being noticed, which was, in Emma's case, quite a lot. Because she was observant and curious and had a gift for drawing that her 2nd grade teacher had mentioned at the spring conference. Not in the way teachers mention things as encouragement, but in the way they mention things when they mean it. She drew horses from memory. She had never ridden one. She had seen them in the field behind her grandmother's house in Warner Robins and had looked at them long enough to understand how they moved, and she reproduced that understanding in pencil on whatever paper was available. Her grandmother, her mother's mother, a woman named Estelle, who everyone in the family called Emery, kept a stack of Emma's horse drawings in a kitchen drawer. She had been keeping them since Emma was 5. Ruth Cole was 34 years old in the summer of 1980. She was a licensed practical nurse at the Medical Center of Central Georgia and had spent the previous month in the specific state of vigilance that every parent in Georgia was living in that year. The Atlanta child murders, a series of killings of children and young adults that had gripped the state since 1979, had produced in Georgia parents a permanent, low-frequency fear. The kind that does not prevent ordinary life, but colors it. Ruth let her children play in the neighborhood. She knew where they were. She paid attention. She had paid attention every day of the previous year. And on the morning, she let Emma walk 2 streets over with 65 cents for a neighbor's yard sale. She watched her daughter go around the corner and felt nothing except the ordinary minor relief of a mother who knows exactly where her child is going. Emma was gone for 40 minutes before Ruth noticed. By the time she walked to the yard sale, by the time she established that Emma had been there and left, by the time the first calls to neighbors had produced nothing, 40 minutes had become 2 hours. And by the time she called the Bibb County Police Department, the Georgia June had fully arrived. Brutal, bright, and indifferent. And the street was quiet, in the way streets go quiet when everyone on them has gone inside to make phone calls. She had not known, when Emma walked around the corner, that she was memorizing the sight of her daughter's back. Bibb County Police arrived at the Cole home at 11:43 that morning. The investigation began immediately. The neighbor who had held the yard sale confirmed that Emma had been there, had looked at a box of colored pencils, had decided against them, and had left walking in the direction of home at approximately 9:55. 3 other neighbors confirmed seeing a child matching Emma's description on the sidewalk between the yard sale and the corner. One neighbor, a woman named Iris Tatum, who had been bringing in her morning newspaper, reported seeing a station wagon, dark green or brown, parked on the street near the corner of Dogwood and Vineville that had not been there earlier. She had noticed it because it was unfamiliar. She had not noticed the driver. She could not give a plate number. The station wagon description was logged. It became the investigation's primary physical lead. It was never matched to a vehicle. By evening of June 14th, every officer available in the Bibb County Department was on the case. By June 15th, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation had been notified, and a state-level search was underway. By June 16th, volunteers were walking a 5-mile radius from the Cole home, and Emma's photograph, the school photograph from the previous February, brown hair, gap-toothed smile, the expression of a child who has been told to sit still and has almost managed it, was on the front page of the Macon Telegraph. The Atlanta child murders investigation had already stretched Georgia's law enforcement resources past their limits. The state was watching for threats to children with a vigilance that had no precedent. And still, somehow, Emma Cole had been taken in broad daylight on a residential street in a city of 120,000 people, and the dark green or brown station wagon had driven away and not been found. The lead GB agent on the case was a man named Donald Pruitt. He was 41 years old, meticulous, and spent 11 months on the case before the investigation was formalized as a cold case in the spring of 1981. He developed 4 persons of interest over that period. All were eliminated through alibi verification, polygraph examination, or lack of physical evidence. The station wagon description had produced 3 follow-up interviews with dark-colored station wagon owners in the county. None led anywhere. In 1981, there was no National Missing Children's Database. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children would not be founded until 1984. In 1980, a child who disappeared in Macon, Georgia, could be a child living under a different name in Tennessee or anywhere within a day's drive. And there was no systematic mechanism for connecting the 2 facts. The Cole family's own investigation, conducted in parallel and at their own expense, and by the force of Ruth Cole's particular refusal to accept what the institutional investigation had produced, generated 14 leads over the following decade. Every one of them was followed. Every one of them was a different child, a different family, a different heartbreak of close but not. Ruth kept a birthday candle on the mantel shelf for Emma's birthday every year. One candle on June 3rd, unlit. She didn't light it because she didn't know if Emma was somewhere celebrating, and if she was, Ruth didn't want to be the one to blow her candle out. She just kept it there for the day. She started doing it in 1981, and she never stopped. By 1990, 10 years had passed. Thomas Cole was 19 and studying at Georgia Southern. Patricia was 13, growing up with a particular weight of being the sibling of a missing child, the one who remained, the one whose presence was a reminder and a comfort simultaneously. She had no memory of Emma, having been 3 years old when Emma disappeared. But she had grown up with Emma's photograph on the mantel and Emma's name said aloud at every birthday and every Christmas and every year on June 14th. And she knew her sister in the way you can know someone you have never consciously known, through the people who loved them. By 2001, 21 years. Gerald Cole had died of a stroke in 1997. Ruth had retired from nursing and moved to a smaller house and brought the photograph from the mantel and the birthday candle shelf with her, because those were not things you left behind. The Georgia Missing Children Network had Emma's case in their database. Every few years, a new investigator would call Ruth with a possible lead. She would listen carefully. She would provide whatever information she had. The leads would resolve into nothing, the way they always had. By 2010, 30 years. Patricia Cole Hendricks, she had married, had 2 sons, drove to Macon on June 14th every year to sit with her mother on the anniversary. They did not make it into a ceremony. They made lunch, and they talked about Emma, and they looked at the photograph, and Ruth put the unlit candle on the shelf. That was all. That was enough to keep something alive that needed to be kept alive. The B Cold Case Unit had been reorganized in 2018. Special Agent Marcus Delacroix was assigned the Cole case as part of a backlog review in early 2022. He was 40 years old, careful and thorough, and had worked cold cases for 8 years. He noted immediately that the case predated DINA databases, predated NCMEC, predated the Amber Alert system, predated almost every investigative tool that would now be standard for a child abduction. He noted that the case had been worked honestly and well within the constraints of 1980. He noted that those constraints were no longer operative. He submitted Emma Cole's case to the NCMEC's Unresolved Cases database and cross-referenced it with the NAMOS Registry, the National Database of Missing and Unidentified Persons. He requested a forensic age progression image, the kind that projects what a child would look like as an adult, to be generated for Emma at current age, which would be 51. He was waiting for the image when Patricia Cole Hendricks called. Every case on this channel is built from records, family testimony, and the years families spent refusing to let a name go silent. If that work matters to you, take a second to like and subscribe, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Now, let's get back to Emma. Patricia's call came on a Thursday afternoon in March 2023. She told Agent Delacroix, received an alert from Ancestry DNA, a consumer genealogy service where she had submitted her DNA 3 years earlier, hoping to learn more about her family history. The alert indicated a new first-degree match, a user identified only by a screen name, with a family tree that showed no connection to any Cole family branch Patricia could identify. A first-degree DNA match means a parent, a child, or a sibling. Patricia had no siblings that she knew of who would appear in the database as a stranger. She had called Ancestry DNA's privacy-compliant contact system and sent a message to the matched user. The matched user had responded within 48 hours. Her name, she said, was Diane Hartley. She was 51 years old. She lived in Knoxville, Tennessee. She was a dental hygienist. She had a husband and 2 adult children. She had submitted her DNA, she wrote, because she had always had a vague, persistent feeling that something in her early childhood did not add up, a feeling she had never been able to name or investigate, but could not dismiss. When she saw Patricia's message, she said, "Something in me knew, before I even understood what it meant. Something already knew." The woman who had raised Diane Hartley, Pauline Hartley, a native of Warner Robins, Georgia, who had moved to Knoxville, Tennessee in the fall of 1980, had died in 2019. She had never spoken about Diane's origins. There had been no birth certificate among her papers that Diane could find, only a replacement document obtained in Tennessee in 1981 that listed Pauline Hartley as mother. The absence had been, Diane told investigators, something she had quietly circled for decades without being able to say why. The DNA comparison between Patricia Cole Hendricks and Diane Hartley, processed by the GBI Forensic Laboratory in March 2023, confirmed a full sibling match. The probability that they were not full siblings, according to the forensic report, was statistically indistinguishable from zero. Agent Delacroix drove to Knoxville in April 2023. He sat across from a 51-year-old woman with brown hair going gray and the careful posture of someone who had spent a career leaning close to people and listening, and he told her what the DNA showed, and what the case file contained, and what the photograph on a mantel in Macon, Georgia, looked like. He had brought a copy of the photograph. He placed it on the table. She looked at it for a long time. Then she said, "I know that girl. I don't know how I know her, but I know that girl." He told her, "That's you." Her name is Emma Cole. She was born in Macon, Georgia on June 3, 1973. Her mother's name is Ruth. Her mother has been waiting 44 years. Diane Hartley, Emma Cole, was quiet for a moment that Delacroix later described as one of the longest moments of his career. Then she said, "Does she know?" He told her, "Not yet." He had wanted to speak with Emma first. She said, "Tell her I'm coming." The meeting between Ruth Cole and her daughter took place on a Saturday in May 2023 at Ruth's house in Macon. Ruth was 78 years old. She had been told by Agent Delacroix 6 weeks earlier, in a phone call she had been receiving variations of for 44 years and had never stopped dreading and never stopped hoping for. This time was different. She knew before he finished speaking that this time was different, because he said, "She's alive, Mrs. Cole. She's alive and she wants to meet you." Ruth had said, "I knew it. I always knew it." Then she had not said anything else for a while. Emma came through the front door on a May morning. Ruth was standing in the hallway. Patricia was in the kitchen, not trusting herself to be the first thing Emma saw, needing a moment. They stood across from each other in the hallway for a few seconds. Then Ruth reached out and held her daughter's face in both hands, the way you hold something you have been searching for, and she said, "Emma." Just that. Emma. And Emma, who had been Diane for 51 years, who had 2 children and a career and a life fully lived and real and hers, put her hands over her mother's hands and said, "I'm here." After a while, Ruth brought her into the living room. The shelf was there. 44 unlit candles, one for each birthday, small and white and standing in a row. Emma looked at them. She asked what they were. Ruth said, "Those are yours. I kept one every year. I didn't light them because I didn't know if you were somewhere celebrating, and I didn't want to blow out your candle." Emma looked at the row of candles for a long time. Then she said, "Let's light them now." They did. Pauline Hartley was deceased and could not be charged. The GBI's investigation of the circumstances of the 1980 abduction found evidence consistent with Pauline Hartley having been the person who took Emma, including records placing a dark green 1977 Ford LTD station wagon registered to Pauline Hartley's estranged husband in Warner Robins, Georgia, in June 1980. The investigation was formally closed in September 2023. The GB issued a public finding acknowledging Emma Cole's identification and the determination that Pauline Hartley had been responsible for her disappearance. Emma Cole, she has kept both names, Diane for her life and Emma for her history, and answers to both, has spoken publicly about the experience once, in a brief statement released through the GB. She said, "I had a good life. I am not going to pretend otherwise. I also had a name that was not mine, and a mother who was not my mother, and a family I did not know existed. All of those things are true at the same time, and I am still learning how to hold them. What I know is that Ruth waited. Patricia waited. My grandmother Emery kept drawings in a kitchen drawer. I want to know about every one of them. Emma Cole was 7 years old. She had brown hair her mother cut straight across every 6 weeks, and she was missing one front tooth, and she could draw a horse from memory. She walked 2 streets over with 65 cents on a June morning, and she did not come home. And for 44 years, the people who loved her held the shape of her absence the only way people can, by refusing to let her name disappear. She came home in May 2023. She is 51 years old. She is still learning what home means when you have lived your whole life without knowing you had been taken from it. Her children have met their grandmother Ruth and their Aunt Patricia, and they have seen the horse drawings that Memory kept. Memory died in 2008, but Ruth had the drawings, had kept them. Naturally, the way she had kept everything. And Emma has said that looking at those drawings felt like meeting someone she recognized from a dream. The NCMEX cited the Emma Cole case in their 2024 annual report on cold case resolutions involving adult identification through consumer DNA genealogy databases. The case is now used as a training example for GBI investigators in the protocol of cross-referencing cold missing children cases with consumer genealogy platforms on an annual basis. Because the databases grow every year, and a match that was not there in 2022 may be there in 2023. And a woman in Tennessee may one day submit a swab out of a feeling she cannot name, and find that the feeling had a name all along. What does it mean to live a full and real life and then discover that part of its foundation was taken from you without your knowledge? Can both things be true at once? The life and the theft of the beginning. When you think about Ruth Cole keeping 44 unlit birthday candles, not lighting them because she didn't want to blow out Emma's candle if Emma was somewhere celebrating. What does that act of restraint and faith tell us about what love looks like when it has nowhere to go but inward? And for those of you who have never submitted to a genealogy DNA service, Emma's story is one of thousands still waiting for the match that will change everything. What would it take for you to make that connection possible? Emma Cole came home after 44 years. Her story reminds us that some doors, no matter how long they stay closed, can still be opened. If you believe that too, subscribe so you don't miss the next case. More cases are waiting in the description. Thank you for being here.